My name is Kathy Ferlin, and my word for this stewardship project is conduct. I chose to use the definition, the manner in which one behaves. Being raised Lutheran and attending parochial school for several years, a verse from Matthew 7 had become ingrained. In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you, for this is the law and the prophets. As a former elementary teacher, conduct, both mine and that of my students, was a critical part of my career. It was important to me that the students behaved and were ready to learn the content that I had to teach them. I always tried to model appropriate behavior for my students so they would even know what good conduct looks like. The students were rewarded as they developed appropriate listening and responding skills, and eventually modeling appropriate conduct regarding social skills and relationships came into the classroom. Throughout my years as an elementary educator, I did see many children learn to treat others the way they wanted to be treated themselves. It became a treasure to watch the primary-aged children grow into kind adolescents and eventually productive, kind adults in our community. Conduct remained an important aspect as I worked with colleagues in learning new curriculum and assessment measures. While many types of change are not welcome with open arms, I tried to conduct myself with kindness and professionalism when met with resistance. Over time, that conduct became reciprocal, and we were able to move forward in our efforts. With respect and kindness embedded in our work, we were able to bring new methods and information to the students with success. In my personal life, my conduct was equally important. For many years, I was a single parent to 3 wonderful children. Knowing that my children were my greatest gift, it was important for me to make every effort to raise them in a loving Christian home. That meant that my conduct in every situation mattered. I wanted my children to follow God's command in Micah 6, verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. While that was not always easy to model, it was important. I wanted my children to be able to live what they learned outside of our home and carry that conduct and thought into their own families. So, how does conduct relate to stewardship? I believe that God expects us to take care of His creation, especially each other. By following His command to love one another and treat each other as we want to be treated, we are continually raising up one another to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with our God.
Congratulations! You've just been promoted to manager. That is an announcement any of us might like to hear in the workplace because it could come with a pay raise. But in fact, we are all managers. To manage suggests being in charge of something, in control of something, organizing, arranging, directing, making things happen according to a plan. We organize our day, a party, a class, a meeting, a meal, a vacation, our calendar, our wardrobe, and many other things on a daily basis. This managing can seduce us into a false premise. It is that because we can make some choices, we are in control not just of a few small things, but of much more, even ownership. We only need something like a COVID pandemic to help us recognize our limits. Nonetheless, good management is always participatory, always collaborative, always a joint effort with certain divisions of labor, and even a hierarchy of power and authority. Jesus and a certain centurion had a discussion about this one day. You will remember Matthew 8:5-13. For I am also a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my slave, do this, and the slave does it. Remember, Matthew tells us Jesus was amazed at the centurion's faith and healed his servant. This may not be the typical stewardship scriptural reference, but it does illustrate, among other things, management, division of labor, power and authority, hierarchy, and even collaboration. The goal for us as Christians is to get out of the trap of thinking that being a manager is about owning and controlling not just a few small things, but owning and controlling much more, about entitlement and power over much more, too much more. Indeed, our goal is to get out of the control, ownership, entitlement mindset that dominates our world, our society, and our culture to a mindset of humility, gratitude, spontaneous generosity, and recognition of the true source of all good things, all power, and all authority. Now, we are charged to use our gifts and resources to achieve the largest and greatest goals we have or can even imagine. We are charged with organizing, arranging, directing, and making things happen to accomplish those goals. In short, we are charged with managing the gifts God has given us to accomplish the mandate God has given us. Do you think you can manage that?
My name is Barbara Artuso, and my word is direction. I would like to share with you how I use the gifts God gave me to provide direction to others. I am so blessed. I was blessed in having parents who valued education and were willing to work and sacrifice to provide me with many years of higher education. That was a gift from God. Certainly, my intellectual ability to study and to learn what was necessary during those years is not of my own making. That, too, is a gift from God. My health was maybe the greatest blessing, as it has enabled me to be active and productive throughout my life. Being geographically located in a county where there were colleagues, especially at the law firm where I worked for almost 20 years, who encouraged and supported me was not an accident. You got it. It was a gift from God. Maybe most significantly, there was the gift of God in the fruit of the Holy Spirit, received in my baptism. Now, what should I do with these gifts? I practiced law for almost 20 years. I practiced law for almost 40 years. I believe that my doing so was using the gifts God gave me, and I hope that my doing so glorified Him. For example, early in my practice, I represented a lot of people who were seeking a divorce, custody of minor children, or support for their now single-parent families. These people were under stress for sure. They sought a specific legal outcome, of course, which required my knowledge and eventually experience. Hopefully, I could provide that direction. But that was not the only direction they needed. They needed to be heard. Some of them had been abused, betrayed, and disappointed. Before I offered direction, I needed to listen with understanding so that I knew how to offer that direction. The direction included explaining the law and processes and how we would try to achieve their objectives. But the direction I offered was not just telling people what to do. It also involved calming them and sometimes modifying their expectations and maybe even helping them change the course they desired from their legal journey. The patience, kindness, and goodness of the Holy Spirit working through me was truly a gift from God. I also practiced criminal defense law. Here were people who clearly needed direction. How would Jesus have treated the children of God who were accused of crimes? They were often neglected as children, impoverished, sometimes addicted or homeless. They had not made good judgments to get them to where they were, and they might not have responded to being told what to do without the compassion Jesus showed to such people. In my effort to give direction with compassion, I was blessed by that gift from God. Toward the end of my practice, I began representing people who were sick and or injured and could not support themselves through working. I worked to obtain for them benefits available from the federal government. I gave them direction as to what benefits were available and how we would work together to obtain them. In the alternative, I gave them direction away from such benefits when I felt they would be unsuccessful in pursuing them. Instead, I directed them to other job programs or other educational opportunities. This was both the most direction I gave and the most satisfying. In this area of practice, more than the others, I felt I changed lives for the better. Now that was a gift from God. Speaking of changing lives for the better, I eventually became an administrative law judge for the Social Security Administration. There I had the ability to provide life-changing direction in the decisions I made about whether or not people were entitled to disability benefits. I considered these cases carefully and seriously, using all of the gifts of God I've already mentioned, knowing the impact that those decisions would have. After all those stories, you may be wondering what direction has to do with stewardship. Well, my understanding of living a life of stewardship is that we first recognize that all of our gifts, health, education, opportunity, are not coincidences or luck. They are gifts from God. And they are not given to us for our own purposes. Rather, we are to use them to glorify the God whom we worship in grateful response to our having received them. I have tried to live that life of stewardship. And my prayer for you is that you devote yourselves to discerning the gifts God has given you and finding ways to use them to serve.
Guidance, leadership, instruction, or direction, to counsel. Whether it is as a mom, a sister, a friend, a pastor, or as the director of spiritual care and congregation and community liaison at Glade Run Lutheran Services, much of my day is spent guiding, providing direction and instruction, leading, and counseling. I guide our son TJ to make good choices. I guide my family and friends in making decisions. I guide colleagues and those we serve at Glade Run through difficult situations and faith questions. And I guide congregations as they navigate change and transitions, as they process losses and wrestle with difficult conversations. To guide is to coach and to accompany people. It often means raising more questions than providing answers. It is to meet people where they are, to support them as they discover their own gifts of time, talent, and treasure, and to help them learn how to be faithful stewards. Paul writes in Romans chapter 8, verse 6, "We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us." As children of God, each of us has been given freely unique gifts and abilities to be used to bring about the kingdom of God. We've been set apart, called to be faithful stewards of these gifts. God has given us these gifts not for our own purpose, but for the common good. These gifts are meant to be shared with one another. We've been called to guide, to lead, to instruct, to provide direction and counsel to the people and places and things that are entrusted to our care. But more than that, we are called to guide. We are called to seek guidance from God. In Psalm 25, verses 4 through 5 and 8 through 10, David proclaims, "Make me to know your ways, O Lord, teach me your paths. Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation, and I wait all day long. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right, and teaches the humble his way. All the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep his covenant and his decrees. Personally, I regularly seek guidance from people and from God. I even sought guidance when writing this devotion. And though much of my life, more than I've provided guidance, I've been guided. There are very few decisions that I have made without seeking first the guidance from others. And I have been blessed with so many people in my life who have guided me through life's decisions, challenges, and this day-to-day situations. People who've helped me discover my gifts and where God is calling me. Academic and Sunday school teachers, pastors, colleagues, and friends have empowered me, gently guiding me and stewarding faithfully the many gifts that God entrusted to my care. I am who I am today as a pastor and as a person because of those who've guided me along the way. We need one another. To be good and faithful stewards, we need the support and guidance of those around us, and most importantly, from God. My constant prayer to God is, Thy will be done. Both in big and little decisions, I pray for God to guide and direct me, and that I may follow God's will. I pray that God will guide the work we do and the decisions we make as individuals, as communities, as a nation, and as the body of Christ. And then I pray we will humble ourselves and follow God's direction and guidance. God has set us apart as stewards, as guides, not for our own purposes or for control, but in accordance to God's will and way. Even as stewards, God is still in charge. I know I need to be reminded that this way or that way, my way or your way, are never the right way, unless it is God's way. I know I needed to be reminded that God is ever present and ultimately in control. I know I need to get out of the way for God's way in order for God to work through me. And knowing all of that, I know I will still fall short and that God's love will remain the same. God's will be done. God's kingdom will come. That is the good news I know I needed to hear today. In a time where everything seems so polarized, divided, and out of my control. Maybe this is the gospel news you needed to be reminded of too. The good news that you have been longing to hear. God is with us, guiding, directing, leading, instructing, and counseling. May we lean into the good news and open ourselves up so that we may lead and guide, so that God may lead and guide us as we steward the gifts we have been given. May God's will be done in, through, and among you.
Hello, my name is DEANN George. Administration. Is it important? What do administrators do? There are different types of administrators. Administrative assistants, contract administrator, network administrator, database administrator, payroll administrator, benefits administrator, hospital administrator, school administrator, even church administrator. And we all know that running a household or family takes some administrative skill. Administration must be important. However, we often don't think about the value of the work necessary for effective administration. Sometimes administrative tasks are seen as bothersome, tedious, or downright boring. I've seen eyes glaze over when a budget is passed up for review. Have you ever heard a child say that when they grow up they want to be an administrator? I'm really not feeling excited about administration right now. Let's Google administration. Boring administration. Here's something I found. Admin can be soul-sucking. From horrendous tedium to sheer volume, we hate administrative tasks. In fact, many aspects of admin have been linked to a rise in depression. So let's talk about fireworks. This past summer, I enjoyed a beautiful fireworks display over the lake at camp. The fireworks could be seen in the sky as well as the reflection on the lake, and it lasted a glorious half an hour. It was awesome. During the show, I noticed the people on the other side of the lake who were making the fireworks display happen. And before that evening, people had to design the whole show, and the plans had to incorporate safety at all times. Someone had to coordinate the event with the campground. Someone had to make sure regulations were followed. Someone had to purchase all the necessary supplies and materials. Someone had to pay the bills and employees. It's sounding like a lot of administration had to take place behind the scenes before this beautiful fireworks display became a reality. In many areas of our lives, we trust in administration being done behind the scenes. Sometimes great skill or giftedness are required, and sometimes what's required may be more routine. Regardless, effective administrators are accountable over time, demonstrating care and earning trust. Administration is important in business, in families, in church, in everyday life. But administration is not exciting to most people, and that's okay. There's a lot of beauty in ordinary things. And that's a quote by Pam from the series finale of The Office.
When we think of the word governance today, we probably automatically think of our government. And in today's climate, we either immediately want to engage in this impassioned conversation about politics, or we want to run for the hills with our hands over our ears. The concept of governance really is tainted. But what if we began to think of governance as an act of stewardship? Let's think about that. In Genesis, God gave Adam and Eve a mandate to fill the earth, to subdue it, to rule over it. God gave Adam and Eve all of creation as this incredible gift, and in essence said to them, be responsible for it, take care of it. Today we're prone to think of that in order to govern, we need to be in a formal position to do so. And if we're not in that formal position, well, then that's somebody else's responsibility. And while indeed there are formal governance positions, I believe governance, at least as we understand the biblical perspective, isn't really about our position. After all, if we oversee or control the direction of something, well, that's the very definition of governance. So Adam and Eve governed creation. So if we're on the board of an organization and we oversee or control the direction of that organization. If we're a teacher, we oversee and control the direction of our classroom and our students. If we're a parent, we oversee or control the direction of our children, or at least try to. And if we clean houses, well, then we oversee and control and making sure our house is clean. Stewardship is taking what God has given us generously and taking care of that. He's given each of us gifts and talents that he expects us to use in an act of worship for his glory, to steward, if you will. I believe that worship should not be reserved for Sunday mornings. All of our lives are meant to be worship, lived out for the common good. Our work is meant to be worship. Our parenting is meant to be worship. Our very lives are meant to be stewarded in an act of worship for God's glory. I have this incredible opportunity every day in my work with Lutheran Senior Life to steward the gifts and talents that God has given me to impact the lives of the people that he's entrusted to our care and the lives of the people that I work with. I'd like to leave you with one question before I wrap up. God has given you gifts and talents that he expects you to steward. So how is he calling you to take those gifts and talents and use them in your everyday, ordinary, walking around life for his glory? Hope you think about that.
Let's face it, when it comes to stewardship, yes, we know it is important. Yes, we know it is serious. And yes, we know it can be boring. When was the last time you saw an action-adventure movie with the tagline, time, talent, and treasure? So my task today is to talk a little bit about the word handling as it pertains to stewardship, and do so before you lose interest and move on to the next video. Seriously, perhaps looking at a synonym for stewardship can help find a new perspective. So when I say handling, what comes to mind for you? Go ahead, blurt it out. I'll wait. Oh, sorry. Thought we were on a Zoom call for a moment. This time it's just me talking to the computer, and so I can't hear you because you're not there yet. Well, I'm sure you had something great to say, and we'll have to catch up sometime to delve into that. So since I can't hear you, I'll go ahead and take my turn to talk about the word handling. When I think of handling, I think of taking responsibility to do something. These phrases come to mind. Who's handling that? I have a handle on that. Handling also reminds me of taking care to protect something. Handle with care. Shipping and handling. In sports, when a ball is bobbled, they say, "He can't find the handle." Handling can also mean taking care to oversee something to its conclusion. Like a project or a huge corporate initiative, or Handel's Messiah. Oh, wrong handle. Just checking to see if you're listening. Handling may also means to touch or feel or hold something. Think of your most prized possession. How do you handle that? Do you put gloves on first? Is there unwrapping involved with many protective layers? So what does handling have to do with stewardship? It has everything to do with it. Toil as we may for what we have, none of it is ours. It's God's on loan to us. As we act as stewards of what God has given us, we take responsibility for handling or caring for what has been generously given to us. As we consider our response to God's generosity, we own that response and we handle it to its conclusion. As we step back and consider the bigger picture beyond our own lives and the lives of those close to us, we realize that life on this earth is relatively short. We need to make the most of each day, thanking God for it and handling ourselves in a way that is pleasing to God. The saying has become trite, but is so true. It is so much better to give than to receive. It's the truth. Can you handle that truth?
Hello, I'm Brandon James, and been asked to comment about the word operation and stewardship. Webster defines operation as a procedure that is part of a series in some work. When I reflect on the word operation as defined by Webster and its relationship to stewardship, several things come to mind. First, in my life, that means that the words some work relates to God's work as defined by the mission of the organization. Secondly, the words a part of a series of work means I'm working with others to achieve the mission and my responsibilities as part of the whole. I've been blessed to have the opportunity over the years to serve in a number of organizations, many related to the church. I was employed for 27 years as the administrator of a large social service organization. I've also served as a volunteer officer or treasurer in our seminary, our synod, the camp, and my congregation. In each instance, the organization's mission and my mission were compatible, and I could support them with my time, talents, and resources. In each of these organizations, I have found myself involved with money and budgets. I took seriously my role in seeing that each organization was run on a solid financial position. I also know it's important that organizations choose wisely what activities and programs in which they become, because they need to ensure that the activities advance their mission. We as Christians and Lutherans often find conversations about personal finances as very distasteful. Stewardship activities quite often are seen as fundraising and therefore are an activity people want to avoid. I've learned several things. I have learned that mission without money does not work. I've learned that asking for money is distasteful to me. I have learned that many people believe in the same missions that I do. I have learned that asking people to join me in supporting well-defined missions can be an enjoyable act because the community of believers can do wonderful things when we work together. I have learned that being a part of some work in God's mission is true stewardship.
I'm Bev Banyay, a retired pastor and former teacher and social worker. Many of the activities I conducted during my working hours included the task of overseeing what others did. Oversight has two meanings, either omission due to carelessness or supervision by keeping a watchful eye on what is happening. I'm talking about the watchful eye. Having a watchful eye means not doing something, but seeing that something is done. This may include some directions and demonstrations to prepare another person to complete a task. For instance, my mother showed my cousin Jim and me how to measure ingredients to bake cookies. Then she watched as we made a mess of the entire kitchen while we measured, mixed, and put the cookie dough on the sheets. Eventually, we could bake the cookies and sort of clean up our mess. And Mom encouraged and watched. Another example of oversight was when I was coaching softball as a teacher. Once the season began, my job was to oversee what was happening. Before that, I was teaching and encouraging, and as kids gained skills and knowledge, they were ready to take the game on themselves. Congregations within have stewardship also. Seeing that things happen, council officers and chairs need clear descriptions of their duties in order to perform maximum capacity. Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, music directors, VBS personnel, congregational support staff, and custodians also need clear direction, support, and supplies so they're equipped to successfully execute their duties. Church councils need to equip others and provide oversight to see that things happen that need to happen. And of course, the pastor, in addition to all the other roles, is often overseeing all the activities of the congregation. And likewise, our synod staff plays a similar role for congregations, offering pastoral care, supply preaching, equipping committees with personnel and knowledge, offering workshops and other instructions so that they can all do the task assigned to them. So good luck. Check your constitutions, and then you'll be able to do what God calls us to do, to uplift all God's people to serve the Lord. Amen.
Hi, I'm Deb Roberts, the Executive Director at Lutherland. One of my roles at Lutherland is to supervise the staff and to train the staff to then supervise our campers. Supervision is the word related to stewardship that I'm focusing on. So, the first thing I did was go to the dictionary and look up the word supervise. And the first definition that comes up is to keep watch over. When I read that, I immediately thought of the Christmas story when we hear about the shepherds keeping watch over their flocks by night. Of course they were keeping watch over their flocks. Their flocks were important to them and to their livelihood. A shepherd is the supervisor of the flock. Then, I think about the things that I am called to keep watch over or to supervise. I keep watch over my kids, my family, my home. I keep watch over Lutherland, over the campers and staff and the ministry that happens through camp, over the physical property that I am called to care for, to keep watch over, to supervise. Coincidentally, these are the same things that I most often pray to God every day to keep watch over. I love this idea of supervision as being a part of stewardship because it can be so easy to think of a supervisor as a step above or a step removed or even as bossy. But when I think about the best supervisors that I've had throughout my life, they were supervisors who worked hard to make me better, who made sure that I was equipped to do the task that was presented to me, who took the time to notice my gifts, to teach me, and to encourage me along the way, not just to make me better, but so the people or place or thing that I was supervising was well cared for and able to thrive. It sure sounds like stewardship to me. As God's children, we are called to be good stewards of God's creation, of all that God has given to us. And so I am called by God to keep watch over or to supervise the things that God has entrusted to my care, my family, Lutherland, the church. You are called to watch over, to supervise God's work in the world, to use your gifts, your talents, and your resources to care for, to watch over, to supervise God's work through the ministry of your congregation, of the larger church, and all over the world.